Welcome to the Vertical MRO podcast, where we dive into the world of helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. In each episode, we talk with the technicians, engineers, and experts who keep helicopters flying. Because at the end of the day, no maintenance, no mission. You look at the forecasts that are projecting how many AMPs are needed globally the next 20 years, it's mind-blowing.
Funnily enough, we actually spoke about this at a conference in the US earlier this year because it was a really pressing issue for a lot of the operators. So I suppose on our side of things, back in 2015, the founder of Red Bull, Dietrich Mateschitz, he asked the question of the Flying Bulls here. He said, how does it look for you guys with an apprenticeship program? Essentially, why aren't we doing it? At the time, there wasn't a government-approved apprenticeship program in Austria. And so through a collaboration between my predecessor and some of our upper management here in the Flying Bulls and collaboration with the Austrian government, they managed to push through an apprenticeship program. And we, I think in the first round, got 3 of the 15 positions available within Austria. But so our emphasis has been on getting these young guys in to put these guys through an education that's going to be beneficial to us as an organisation. We don't want them going off to work for an airline or another operation. We want them to learn how to work on things like this and our warbirds, or we sort of make it work for us, I guess you could say.
The Vertical MRO podcast welcomes Anthony Hill and Werner Horvat from the Red Bull Flying Bulls. To celebrate episode 100, we recorded remotely with the Red Bull Flying Bulls maintenance team. They were on the floor of Hangar 7 in Salzburg, Austria. We participated from our studio. Anthony Hill and Werner Horvat joined myself and Faith Ortega for a wide-ranging conversation about what it takes to keep one of the world's most elite and unique fleets operational. We dig into restoring rare vintage aircraft like the S-58, P-51, and DC-6. Covering the challenges of sourcing one-off parts, certification, and re-engineering, and share the Cobra recovery and restoration story. We also explore maintaining aerobatic rotorcraft, the BO-105, how acrobatic flight changes maintenance programs and life limits, and the special logistics and crew requirements for airshow operations. The conversation unpacks the challenges of operating across multiple regulatory systems and explains the role of the National Design Organization. We discuss creative part sourcing, in-house manufacturing, and prototyping, and how emerging MRO technologies such as 3D scanning and printing, digital manuals, and AI are starting to help solve long-standing problems. We discuss the state of the workforce through apprenticeships, recruitment and retention, and preserving tribal knowledge. Throughout the episode, Anthony and Werner share practical career advice focused on continuous learning, stepping out of your comfort zone, and the soft skills that matter. The conversation is capped by a hangar tour and aircraft close-ups. This is an episode to watch on YouTube for the full experience. As a bonus announcement, we want to let you know the Flying Bulls will be bringing the DC-6 and P-38 Lightning to AirVenture Oshkosh this July 2026, crossing the Atlantic for the first time since joining the fleet, with the BO-105 also appearing with the Red Bull Air Force. Stay tuned after the episode for a special closing segment with the Flying Bulls team. Thanks to our listeners and supporters for making 100 episodes possible, and a special thank you to our editor and producer, David, for making this podcast possible. Thank you to this episode's sponsors, Metro Aviation and Robinson Helicopter Company. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation. If you missed part 1, you can find it in our previous episode.
Especially in sort of in more historic aircraft, a lot of the knowledge and a lot of just little intricacies about certain aircraft, certain engine types, whatever it may be, they're not necessarily written anywhere. They're just in the heads and the minds of perhaps some of the older guys in your company. And this was also once again from a former colleague of ours here. He put a lot of emphasis on getting us guys to write these things down, document them, put them in we actually brought in our own system with some of our manuals of we made it a yellow sheet. And it was the yellow sheet system, and that would go into the manual as, listen, we've found a discrepancy in a maintenance manual, latest revision 1949 or something, but we've found something that is not true. And of course, there's no one you can contact about that. So we try and at least get that information documented internally, and hopefully moving forward, then this is something that can help all those young guys coming through, because if if the problem doesn't come up again for 10 more years, then that old guy retires, then the information's gone lost, and
Yep.
someone has to find it out for themselves again in 10 years' time. So
Yeah.
I think documenting this kind of experience-based information, that gets handed down is really important.
Yeah, I think that's one of the goals of the MRO podcast is to kind of capture some of that tribal knowledge because, as you said, once it's gone, it's gone. You know, the
Mm.
notebook that some of these folks take with them in retirement, I think, would be worth a lot of money in
Oh,
you
yeah.
know a lot of shops. So
Yeah.
it's thinking through how do we capture that tribal knowledge and how do we share it. Our vertical MRO conference is another opportunity for us to get folks together and while maybe in their own shop that idea that tribal knowledge is written down in on their little book, now you go to the MRO conference and maybe now it's written down on a napkin, so it's in two places, in some different minds. So I think networking and trying to capture those thoughts and ideas, I think, is really really important. Anthony, I want to go back to you. As we talked about Werner and his roles and responsibilities from a safety standpoint, you've got a very unique role and responsibility. Talk about, your role as it relates to working with Werner and the design side of things and ensuring that safety and compliance kind of goes into, not just that, but the operation as a whole. So talk a little bit about your role and responsibility.
Yeah. As I said, I've been with the Flying Bulls now 24 years, and the company has. I think when I started, we had maybe 10 aircraft, and we're now up to 40. And back then, we were maybe 20 staff members or so. We're now edging up on 100 staff members. And not to bore you with our approval structure and so on, but we have essentially 7 different approvals under various regulations for on the operations side and on the maintenance and engineering side. Um, and so we've recently, sort of due to this, ongoing and never-ending expansion, it seems, we've kind of split up the role of this of compliance monitoring management and safety management, into an ops-based area, which my colleague has taken over, and I'm overseeing the tech side of things. It involves a lot of uh, mandatory internal auditing, going through. This is all on the European regulations side of things and the Austrian national. It involves a lot of me annoying the guys, Werner and the other sort of heads of different departments, going through all the different regulation points, going deep into work packages, in Werner's case, into engineering orders and so on, into processes and procedures. Um, just sort of really ripping apart everything we do, looking at it in detail. Um, it can be a bit of a humbling experience at times, when you read through your manuals and your handbooks and realize that certain things aren't necessarily addressed as they should be. Usually, thankfully, in our case, the what we come up with is that we're doing things correctly. We just haven't necessarily got it documented in our handbook correctly. So we just have to update that. They're the sort of nice findings that you come up with, I guess. So on the compliance side of things, as I said earlier, we're looking at EASA regulations, Austrian national regulations. We're now this year, actually, it's a bit of an emphasis of mine to basically try and cover the FAA activities, maintenance activities, with the same compliance and safety blanket that we cover the other areas, because in our setup, there's actually no mandatory oversight. Uh, Either from the authority or internally, because we're not a 145, we're not a FAA repair station. We have the EASA 145 approval, but on the FAA side, there's nothing mandatory. So, while once again we cover all of our maintenance activities with the same standards, or we hold it all to the same standard, so to say, we'd like to sort of include it in this compliance monitoring system. And once again, not to go too deep into the daily business of the compliance and safety department, but safety management has become a big, catch cry in Europe, in EASA, mainly for us because of the 145 organization that we have. And as much as for some people it's a bit hard initially to get your head around, it's, I think, almost a more effective way of affecting change within your organization, because you're dealing with issues that the guys on the hangar floor are reporting, and so it's not just based on a set of regulations where you're going through point for point and hashing it out, regulation point after regulation point. One just a simple little example where I guess everyone benefits from it, was we had an aircraft here where one of our technicians noticed that two fluid lines under the floor of the aircraft weren't, as that they were basically 180 degrees out from how they appeared in the manual. And that under European law is a mandatory report, and you also have to report it to the type certificate holder. And so we did all of that, and then we got the reply back from the type certificate holder that yes, you're absolutely right. The drawing is incorrect, and they will change it. And they send out then a bulletin to all operators that this has been found. So from our relatively small little operation here, and our colleague who was working over the back here and found that, he's affected some change there in the industry. So it's effective.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. A good safety program is the most efficient way to affect change in an agency. I was voluntold that I was the safety officer in my agency, and it was tough because our safety culture, while we were, I would say, a safe organization as a whole, we didn't have a good safety program in place. And when I bring the word safety up, I think people's eyes glazed over, and it instantly starts to tune me out. And I think getting buy-in was critical. But I think to your point, a lot of agencies and a lot of places are really good at doing the thing they're doing because it's the way it's always been done,
Yep.
and not really evaluating why it is we do that. And a good safety program really, in my mind, looks at that and says, okay, we've done it this way for 20 years. Why are we doing that? And what are the hazards that exist because of the way we do that? And then one easy example that I can think of from my perspective is that our airport, we would park our aircraft facing to the west. In the runway, typically the taxi pattern aircraft would come from east to west. So from the tail of the helicopter, you'd have taxiing airplanes coming up, and without popping the helicopter door and sticking your head out to look, you couldn't see taxiing traffic very easy. So there was a potential for a collision once you pick the aircraft up and pedal turn to the right. One of the safety officers after me was, why are we doing that? Why aren't we parking our aircraft facing to the north so we can see taxiing aircraft going either east or west? And all of us kind of scratched our heads. We're like, I have no idea. We're parking that way because it's how we've always done it. So I think it's an easy example of how these safety programs can really change organizations for the better. Faith, I see you smiling over there. I think something percolating. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
There's been the first place I worked, there was a lot of stuff that, it was very much, that's the way we've always done it. Tooling, equipment, that's one thing that when I was in A&P school, they were like, hey, don't barter with that. Like the minute that you see that they're compromising something, like just don't be a part of that project, or, if it's that bad, walk out, which it wasn't to that level. But there was a couple times where that company was really good on, you wanted to get the attaboy of getting the job done type of deal. And so there was a couple times I remember my dad always used to ask, when you're in the shop at the house, if you need to make shift or do something to make something work, it's not as big of a deal, right? But in aviation, it is a big deal. And so, for lack of better terms, my dad always called it backyard bullshit. He would be like, oh yeah, does that happen in aviation? And I was like, no. And then I was on this job for 7 or 8 months, and the first time I ever saw some backyard bullshit, I said, I think I'm gonna watch. I'm not gonna partake because I just didn't like the way that they were lifting something out of the helicopter. And I'm like, can it do it? Yeah. Should it? No. I said,
Yeah.
if you guys feel comfortable doing that and you've done it, a million times, I'll watch. But I think I'm good. But yeah, there's been a couple times, but the company I work for now, very, very different. They actually have a company safety culture. Not that the other place didn't. It was just different. It was a totally different ball game when you go from 91 to 135 and all the things that come with it. So, but yeah, I didn't know what that word meant. That I heard it over and over in new hire and in doc. They kept saying, "Oh, our safety culture, our company culture." And I honestly just kind of did the head nod like I understood what they were talking about until I got into the field and I saw firsthand, if something's not right, say something, they're going to get you the equipment that you need, or hey, we're going to have you put a safety report in. And it's basically to shoot up a flare to make sure nobody else's equipment is defaulted or bad. So I really like that they gave the mechanics a much deeper voice and we were allowed to use it. So that's one thing that really made me happy to see. And I always implore that to new mechanics as well, or people that are, looking to go work for a company. It's not that the company's taking a chance on you, you're also taking a chance on that company. And, that certificate, there's a lot of validity behind it when you sign it. So make sure that you're signing it for people that you trust that would back you. So that's one thing that I always implore to younger people that are listening to this as well, looking for a job. Make sure, you work with a company that's also willing to go to bat for you if something happens. That's something too our company does. You're human, you're going to mess up. That's one of the first questions I always ask whenever they, turn the table at an interview and they say, "Hey, what do you have for us?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm human. When I mess up, obviously if there's no malice intent or no severe neglect, like, are you guys willing to work with me, or how does it work?" And they said, "Absolutely. We do remedial training. We do a lot of teaching moments. We would rather do that because you are going to mess up. It's not if, it's when."
Yeah, that just culture is so important. To your point on mistakes, we're human, and that's been highlighted in the last 2 weeks. I think in a couple different ways. The F-18s that just crashed over the weekend in Idaho. Talk about tip of the spear, folks who are dialed in,
Yeah.
and you see them
Yeah.
make a mistake like that, and thank God they all survived. But it just highlights, the risk of aviation, right? A small miscalculation, a small mistake can have severe consequences, and that just culture is so important. So, Anthony, for you, when it comes to the safety program, when it comes to getting folks to buy in to the concept of what a safety program is, to either affect change or to literally make your program safer, what advice would you have for a shop, an agency who's kind of struggling to bring their safety program up from the ground?
Yeah, I guess I sort of see it as a philosophy, and it has to be ingrained in the company. If it's a change that has to happen, it's not going to happen overnight. It's when you're talking about a culture, no matter what culture you're talking about, these things they don't change overnight. It has to start from the top. It has to be supported from the guys at the top, and if you're preaching it, you have to live it as well. So there's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of communication. Like I say, gaining the trust of the guys. I, I personally, in my position, I feel I get along with everyone here in the maintenance department, and so far we've actually it's been pretty relatively seamless, incorporating this reporting system. We've got a system where it's an app on our phones. If guys have to report something or want to report something, we tried to sort of implement it in a way that just makes it a bit more inviting to get the guys involved in it. And where we have the advantage that I suppose we're small enough that we can go and talk to the guys, like that they can put a report in about something, and we can go and chat to them. We're not at different line stations around the world or around Europe. So yeah, communication is the biggest thing. Transparency, honesty.
That leadership aspect of it's important. Like you brought up, if your leadership isn't supportive, and don't look at this safety program as a check the box type thing because it's not. I think a good safety program
No.
is literally a program that affects change and makes your operation more effective and efficient. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. Uh, Vern, I want to move on to you for a minute here. We talked about the fleet that you guys maintain. You guys have a very unique fleet. It requires a lot of, I would say, unique perspectives and focus on what you're doing. With S58 and the Bristol Sycamore, being that they're so rare, um, from an engineering standpoint, what makes them so unique? What challenges do you find yourself kind of scratching your head with most often?
Yeah, so the S58, as you see it behind me, and just for the people that see it, that's not a wallpaper. It's like the real aircraft that's behind me. As I mentioned initially, the S58, even that being old, so the one that we have here was built in 1956 and was initially operated in the United States and then heading over to Europe and was flown there for a very long time when it ended up in Germany. And now we got it and brought it to Salzburg into our fleet. We kind of had to learn on the hard way very quickly that, of course, it's a very old type, but we're still having a type certificate holder. But this document went through several hands, so it's no longer owned by Sikorsky. And only just a few of these aircraft are still operating in the world. And even out of this few, only very few have still the radial engine. Yeah. So again, when it comes to parts, or it gets to an overhaul for a main gearbox or for the engine, there is only, if any, a few shops that can do it. So we had initially we had to really check. Is it still possible to do it under the full type certificate FAA standard category aircraft? Yeah. So that was the initial challenge, and then of course we want to do the same standardization, fleet standardization, and the modifications as we want to do. We want to have a really nice rotorcraft. So Anthony showed you before when he turned his camera, our DC6, which is the crown jewel on the fixed wing side. So the S58 is supposed to be the pendant on the rotorcraft side, right? So we want to have it really neat, really perfect. We will turn it from a 12-seater to an 8-seater with an VIP interior. We will upgrade the cockpit and all that stuff. But that being said, we cannot just do that, having a type certificated aircraft. Yeah. So we have to work on some STCs. So we work closely with an ODA in the United States that does supports us with the paperwork. Then of course it's challenging having like the distance not only in miles but also in the time difference. Yeah? And so there's really a lot of things you have to take in mind if you start such a project, and you really have to have like the long breath to go it until the end.
Yeah, we talked about tribal knowledge earlier and how important that is in the industry. Being that there's so few of those that exist in the world, I would imagine most of the tribal knowledge that surrounds that particular airframe is long gone. And so
100%. So when we were talking about manuals, as Faith mentioned before, so all these manuals have like this big of dust on it, right? So sometimes the last revisions are really like 30, 40 years ago. But again, these documents, they are still applicable. Yeah. And if you run into something that you have to change, you have to get a DR or you talk to the TC holder if they can help you out with some alternatives. So it's really challenging to do it, yeah. But we'll come there, yeah. So all the hurdles that we had so far, we jumped over, and we'll find a solution.
Yeah, really impressive that you guys are able to do that level of work and to complete an aircraft like that. Faith, any questions as it relates to that?
First up, I was thinking, the Kiowa, at least I'm lucky enough that the Kiowa, Bell likes to cookie cutter a lot of their products. So, the Kiowa is very similar to the Jet Ranger, the Long Ranger, even the 407 if you're looking at the Kiowa D model. So at least, if I have an idea of how those are maintained in today's world, there are things that I can choose to do more of on the older ships. But I can't imagine your guys' case because those are very unique aircraft and there's not a lot that follow them. They were kind of their own deal. So that alone is amazing. And like I said, I've been thinking about that this whole time, just like how to find the information. And I can't imagine because there's still guys around in the Army Heritage Foundation. And I'm so lucky they're on the same airfield and they're there every Tuesday, Thursday. So I can run over there. And usually the 10-minute conversation is a little bit longer than 10 minutes because they have a captive audience and they're older guys that want to drink coffee and, hang out. But it's great that I have access to them. I can't imagine like where you guys are too. That would be tough. But along those lines, so we're talking about the aircraft itself, maintaining them, structural integrity. I see the one behind you clearly looks like it's getting a once over on the structure side. When these aircraft are subjected to, different altitudes, elevations, I know the BO-105 behind Anthony there, obviously you guys are doing aerobatics. Are there different stresses involved? Are there different piece parts, components, drivetrains, things that wear and tear a lot faster than a normal straight level flying aircraft would experience?
Yeah, so jumping from this to the BO-105, it's for me it's always kind of interesting because the BO-105 is also getting a little bit of a vintage rotorcraft, right? Because it was a design of the 70s. So and we start also with the BO-5. That being said, in general, running into some of the issues that we have with the S58 because there are not much. Of this helicopter type going around. And if it comes to component maintenance, like for the main gearbox or for the hydraulic unit, it gets really, really challenging. So that being said, it's just not too much of a difference in the upcoming future between this one and the BO-105. But towards your question in regard on how we operate them in the aerobatic displays, the most important things I think people should know is that those aircraft are not structurally or in any kind modified compared to the 105 that came out of the line. So this is how they came out of the line. The main difference between having a BO-105 that you purely use to fly straight and level and the ones we are doing with the aerobatics is a different maintenance program, and it's a supplement to the maintenance manual, and it's a supplement to the flight manual, giving it the legal possibility to do it. And again, we mentioned it sometime already, it's a fully EASA type certificate aircraft, which means we have an STC from the OEM, which is Airbus Helicopter, that allows us to do that. So which means, luckily, as an engineer, I don't have to really look into everything that has to be covered to fly the BO-105 in the acrobatics. So Airbus Helicopters did that for us in this STC. And this STC is only applicable for 2 of our aircraft, for the 2 serial numbers that we have. So if you ever see a picture of the BO-105s that we have, it's like 2 of the blue ones here in Austria, and the one is the gray one where Anthony mentioned it's used as a camera helicopter as well. But we only do the aerobatics with the blue ones. And it's important to know because you cannot swap components between the acrobatic ones and the non-acrobatic ones. You can swap between the acrobatic ones, but as soon as you did acrobatics with some of the components, you must no longer use them in a non-acrobatic version, right? So, and coming to these additional limitations, I think it's 36 components that got an additional life limit on hours you do acrobatic, right? So we are not only counting the flight hours itself, but we separately count the aerobatic hours. Yeah. So some components, they might have no regular life limit at all, but get one if you do acrobatics, and some might have a high life limit anyway, but that is comparably highly reduced due to the acrobatic flights. Yeah. So that's the quick summary on that. And other than that, the pilot manual, it's not too big of a thing. It's allowed to do, I think it's 3.1 G plus and minus 0.5 on the negative. So compared to a fixed wing aerobatics, this is really low G. And it's and also the takeoff weight. If you reduce that a little bit, of course you lower the forces and the wear on the components as well. But then again, it's very fascinating that at that time MBB, when they produced the 105, they came up with a helicopter that is now able to do this.
That's interesting. I was curious about that because I know Bell products, how they track, depending on which make and model, if you have to track landings or RINs, obviously the pilot usually will keep tabs on those. But even Bell cares sometimes about auto rotations. If it's a full down, they'll say, oh, that counts for 5 RINs. So I was only imagining, if you do a barrel roll, that counts as 10 RINs. I was curious if they kind of calculate it like that, or if it's just hey, if you're on this program, and these are your new limits.
Yes. So that, I mean, as I said, we only have the 2 serial numbers that are basically certified for the aerobatics, and we use them for acrobatics. So there is no doubt on what kind you use it. But we are not counting like rolls or loops or bow turns. We are counting on the minutes, actually, on how many minutes we do the acrobatic flights. Right.
That's really interesting. Cool.
On the podcast, we spent a lot of time discussing the BO-105. Meet Mirko, operations manager and chief pilot for the Flying Bulls helicopters.
Hi, my name is Flying Mirko. I'm 42 years old, and I'm the lucky one being in charge of the helicopter operation here at the Flying Bulls. I'm the flight ops manager and chief pilot. So out of the fleet of more than 40 aircrafts we have 10 helicopters. They are so different in the operation as well. We have a Bell 47, we have 3 BO-105s, we have an A-Star, we have an EC-135, we have an Alouette 3, we have a Sikorsky S-58, and the last one flying in the world, the Bristol Sycamore. Besides the obvious challenges we have operating these aircrafts, right now I'm sitting in one of the 2 aerobatic certified BO-105s. The BO-105 is built like a tank. The heart of this helicopter that makes it aerobatic capable is for sure the rigid rotor with the one titanium piece rotor head. So to address these 3 challenges we have, the operational challenge for sure is this rapid changing of attitude. We have high changing loads. Of course, they are not as high as in an aerobatic airplane, but still we are going up to more than 3 Gs to minus 0.5 Gs. The second challenge we have or we face is the maintenance challenge. We have possible accelerated fatigue or wear of components. We have a standard maintenance manual intervals that maybe are not enough for this aerobatic flying, and we have, of course, existing or extra stress on avionics, on wiring, on fittings, on additional equipment like the smoke generators we have on board, and the main challenge, of course, the BO-105 or the support for the BO-105 is getting harder and harder. So we have main components like the main gearbox and the dual hydraulic system, which are a bit tricky to get or to maintain. We are lucky enough to have an extremely good team in the house that is well connected worldwide, and we are managing together with good support from Airbus to keep these components and this helicopter flying as long as possible. The third challenge we have is, in my opinion, the most important one, and this is like the connection in between the ops department and the maintenance department, and in addition also our safety department. We try to have this just culture in the company. So what is extremely important, the open communication in between the ops department and maintenance department, giving both of them the same amount of importance. Everyone can just openly discuss maneuvers, opinions, etc., just to have a common ground, because in the end it's about us, about the company, about the operation, and it's important to be heard.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
When you look at that as a whole, as the maintenance program as a whole, is there anything that is really surprising to you? Like Faith had brought up the stress that's put on the airframe, the components. Is there one component that kind of shocked you as far as how well it either takes or doesn't take some of that G loading?
No, honestly not. And I don't know whom I have to quote there, but I think at some point we had some engineers here that did the initial calculations on the helicopter, and at least I was told that one of them mentioned this helicopter can basically not be destroyed in flight. So whatever maneuver you do, it's so over-engineered, like the rigid rotor system and the titanium rotor head that you have up there. You either lose control of the helicopter before you really break it apart in flight. And I also think like some of the time limits that Airbus helicopters came up with, they came up on of course calculations and operational experience they had, and of course I'm 100% sure there is a very good safety buffer on that.
Sure.
I think the rotor blades I think are one of them. So I think the rotor blades they have a time limit of 60 hours of acrobatic flights, which is comparably low.
Yeah. Last question on the aerobatics. So we talked about, the pilot side before and how nice it is to experience things from both the maintainer and the pilot side. But from even riding along in the side seat, the left seat or right seat, whoever, that is, have you had a chance to fly any of those aerobatic profiles?
Yes, I was lucky enough to have done it a couple of times, and as I mentioned, so being a fixed wing pilot or having flown in an extra or whatever acrobatic aircraft you have, you would think of getting like doing a loop or getting like high Gs, 6, 7, 8 Gs, whatever. If you really the pilot gives you a hard time, and in the BO 105, it's more like oops, all of a sudden you did a roll, and oops, all of a sudden you did a loop because you're never going like towards the edge, and also, as I mentioned, you do not get, like, for me personally, like, positive G's are not so bad than negative ones, and as we cannot go below the minus 0.5, it's really a really fun and cool ride to do it.
That's cool. Anthony, for you, have you had a chance to experience that?
I was lucky enough to sit in on a display in the Cobra, actually. So I haven't been in the BO 105 for a display, but in the Cobra, yeah, it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
When I see that demonstration, and I ask myself, one, would I be willing to do it as a pilot? And the answer is no. I wouldn't have the courage to do it, and I even don't know if I could sit as a passenger and do it. But it's really cool, visually. It's impressive, and then from a design standpoint, how impressive that Airbus has designed that aircraft to withstand those types of forces. Just really cool. So before we move on, Faith, any last questions on aerobatics?
No, I think you guys covered it.
Yeah, it's such a cool part of what you guys do at Red Bull, and I think that's the one thing. If people talk about flying bulls, I think that's probably the first thing that comes to mind, right? Is seeing that helicopter do something that it, in my mind, definitely shouldn't do. But let's, Anthony, go to you and talk a little more in depth on the Cobra. Again, a little bit of research I did talked about that being a U.S. Army Cobra, and it was essentially left in a field. Someone picked it up, refurbed it, and you guys now have possession of that. Talk about some of the maintenance challenges that you guys experience as you maintain the Cobra.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke briefly about it before. Obviously, spare parts is and can be an issue with this one. An ex-military aircraft, and not so many of them, certainly in the civilian world around the place. So that's one of the ones that comes on the difficult list for our logistics department. I chatted with some of the guys who are working on the annual there at the moment about their challenges that they come up against, and they told me a couple of things, like one big thing is the track and balance. I mean, with those massive rotors there, they don't have trim tabs, so your adjustment is purely through the pitch links, and that's apparently a bit of a puzzle that can take quite a bit of work to get right. That was sort of the biggest thing they told me about apart from that, our Cobra here is in pretty good shape. They last year they took it upon themselves to replace a lot of the wiring in it, and that improved everyone's feeling about the thing. And yeah, they put a few hours on it each year.
That's cool. One of the things that strikes me, not just in the airframes alone, because the airframes are impressive, but the paint jobs that you see on the Red Bull aircraft is really cool. Do you guys have a paint booth interior in your shop that you guys can use for that, or do you guys have to ship that out for the designs?
Yeah, so actually we have a paint shop, and it's right over there. So it's not on the camera, but it's behind the S58, or actually next to the S58. And so of course it has a size limit, so you cannot fit anything in there. But like for instance the T51 Mustangs, we painted here. Also the painting of the S58 of the fuselage in the back was the stripping was done here. So yes, we do have a paint shop. Yeah, we do have an upholstery. We have sheet metal shops. We have all kind of machinery. So as much as we can do in house, because during the restoration, no matter what type or helicopter or aircraft fixed wing it is, you run into small work, and if you have to rely on external contractors for just a small stitching or whatever, it will take even more time, right? So we'll try to do as much as we can in house.
Yeah, how cool. Love those paint jobs for sure. Something I want to get into. Time's flying here, so I'm trying to get through as much as we can in the 20 minutes or so we have left. But you talk about the operations that you guys support globally, whether it's air shows or VIP transport or anything else. What are some of the challenges that you guys face logistically as you're moving aircraft or you're moving operations from one area of regulation to another?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking air show operations, we, regardless whether we're talking helicopters or fixed wing, we send technicians to all air shows. If we're sending a single BO-105 to a small airfield for a display in a small box, we'll send a technician with it. We have had situations in the past where at an air show it could be in Bucharest, Romania was one that I remember, for example, where at the end of the day we had a problem with one of our fixed wing aircraft, and our logistics guys and a couple of technicians were available by phone here. It was a Saturday evening, and someone jumped on a late night flight with a component in their luggage, and we had the plane ready for the following morning for the display. It was an all nighter, but yeah, we you can never really prepare for all eventualities, because we all know, Faith, you'll know this, whatever you have with you is exactly the thing that won't break, and whatever you don't have is going to break. And the tools that you don't have are the ones you're going to need. So it's just that age old game. But basically we're a pretty close team. Everyone's pretty committed, and the guys who are back at base are ready to help, and everyone of course wants everything to fly the next day.
That level of logistics is always interesting to me because I think of shipping parts in particular. There's so many considerations that have to be taken into place, from how it's packaged to who's delivering it to some of the international rules and customs requirements that exist. We had a border shipping panel on at our VMRO podcast or VMRO conference, and it came down to specific requirements for the blade box as it relates to wood. It had to be a particular kind of wood,
Yeah.
and certain countries wouldn't let this particular kind of wood in because of pests, not pesticides, but bugs essentially.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's something I wouldn't even think of.
Our logistics can tell you all about that. That's one of the regulations here. Yeah.
Yeah, wild, really cool that you guys can support, all that you do support internationally, regionally, and again amongst different governing bodies, whether it's EASA or the FAA. Any obvious challenges that come with working with those different governing bodies as you transition from one area to the next?
Werner and I spoke about this earlier, that one thing that one thing that not only on the logistics side of things and shipping parts around or support, but one thing that's really important to us is having a good working relationship with our national authorities here. We particularly on the tech, on the maintenance side of things, because of the number of approvals that we have and because of the relative complexity of our organization, they're knocking on the door here. You could say once a month on average, if not more. So we're very much on a first name basis with them, but all in a positive sense. Even to the point where we can call them up with questions, and it's thankfully it's with our national authorities here, that the ones that in particular that Werner and myself and the maintenance guys deal with. You could almost say it's more of a collaboration or a cooperation. No one's trying to do anyone over, and that's incredibly important for us to continue and to uphold.
Yeah, those relationships are so important. At European Rotors, it seemed like IASA had one of the more popular booths on the floor, which I thought was really cool. To your point of facilitating those relationships and making sure each side kind of understands the other. I think in the U.S., if the FAA has a booth, I don't think many people want to go to the FAA booth and say hi. So when everyone's at IASA, I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. I thought that was pretty cool. Faith, any insight from you or questions as it relates to logistics or governance?
No, I just think it's amazing how many entities you guys have to collaborate with, and I was thinking that too, because you guys have even done air shows here, with your products, like getting them here to the US. So I was wondering how that works, because I've only ever done a couple air show events. Like when I say air show, very, very small, like fly in level type stuff, where you have to put up all these NOTAMs and you have to obviously like let everybody at the airport know what your plan is or your intent is for that day. So I can't imagine something that large a scale, like all of the people that have to be involved and that powwow in itself just to have, a successful event. So that's amazing to hear.
Thank you. So actually, we have an own department that just does the organizational stuff around the air shows. Because as I mentioned before, last year we did roughly about 60 shows, but I think we had over 200 requests, and to filter out what we do and what we can do and cannot do, and also then as Anthony mentioned, we always send a technician with it. So it's also logistics, not logistics part wise, but logistic stuff and people wise to have the right technicians with the right licensing, with the right aircraft. And then like a lot of the aircraft are single seaters, and if they go to a small airfield, how do you bring the mechanic there, right? It's also, and then of course if the people work on weekends, they have to take some time off during the week, so you're missing them in the hangar. So that's also a kind of a whole logistics behind it. And as I said, there is an own department just taking care of this logistics. And so we have an event plan for each year, and it's kind of getting fixed between March and April. And we try to only have very few changes after that, because everything is planned then towards October.
Yeah, the deployment of the personnel side of things is interesting, right? Because as you pointed out, if they're not on the floor during the week, they're missing something. They're not a part of some operation that they're probably needed in.
Sure.
Which I guess leads to the next segue into the next question. If you find yourself lucky enough to work for the Flying Bulls, talk about one, what you guys are looking for for the person, the entry level AMP at Flying Bulls, and then what that training program looks like as you progress into Flying Bulls, and kind of how you go through your career there. If you're passionate about rotorcraft maintenance, then be sure to check out Vertical's new Instagram channel at vertical.mro, sharing all things related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. From the latest podcast episodes to conference updates, and even epic photography, Vertical MRO is dedicated to supporting and advancing rotorcraft maintenance, the backbone of our industry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I mentioned our the apprentice program earlier. Yeah, they get put into a team. We have the companies set up into, we call them vintage teams, vintage A, vintage B, the avionics guys. our so-called EASA team that take care of the more modern stuff, and then of course the heli team. But yeah, they just they get straight into it. They just get taken under the wing by one of the longest standing staff members, the under European system, the certifying staff we call them, and yeah, just a lot of it probably the same for Faith and like myself, just straight into the nuts and bolts of it and learning by doing, and then all the classroom learning on top of that.
If you're not coming in as an apprentice, if you're coming over as an AMP, for example, are you typically looking for someone who has specialized knowledge in a particular airframe, or are you looking for more general experience? And how does that play into the decision to bring someone on board?
It's we've had a bit of both, to be honest. On the EASA side of things, it's beneficial to have guys who are type rated on a certain aircraft, because they can immediately sign for release to service on a certain type of aircraft. Other times, to be honest, my wife says the same thing in her business. Other times, an attitude or someone who fits into the team really well is sometimes more important than a bunch of other things, because once again, getting into the weeds of it, the nuts and bolts of it, they can learn that over time. But fitting into the team is crucially important.
Yeah, I want to park there for a minute because I think that's really, really crucial for young folks to hear, or anybody really to hear. Some people don't pay attention to that as much as they should, but the soft skills that we talk about are so critical, right? When we talk about bringing someone into our unit in law enforcement, we want it to be somebody who literally we want to go have a beer with. You know, after a flight's done, after your day's done, do you want to go beyond the cockpit and spend more time with this person? If the answer is yes, they're probably a good fit for the unit. If the answer is no, then you're risking the odds of bringing a toxic culture into the hangar and into the environment that's not good for anybody. So I think that those soft skills are so important when you're looking at the selection process, in particular the beer concept, right? Would you want to go have a beer with somebody? I think that's so important. But
I can tell you then about one of our. It's a mandatory Thursday evening meeting is usually about 6 o'clock. You'll find actually not far from where Werner's standing there. We call it the safety review beer, and you'll have on any given Thursday, whoever has time, whoever can make it, there can be anyone from, and I mean this literally, there'll be anyone from an apprentice to the CEO stood there having a beer, and it's just a bit of a wind down, a bit of a debrief, and but it helps that team spirit, that's for sure.
yeah, the culture I think is truly developed in those, outside the work hours environments, which is really cool. I miss that probably the most of all of the aspects of my career. But, it's a chance for you guys to get together and vent. It's a chance to get together and plan. It's, so much takes place there. I love that aspect of it. Faith, any insight there from you on that?
The very first place I worked was a mom and pop shop, and they used to do that every Friday. They would send the youngest kid on the totem pole. It was usually a paint shop kid around with his hat, and everybody would put money in the hat, and he had to go do the beer run. And then usually we would stay for an hour or two after work, and everyone would kind of sit around and we would talk. And we called it team building. And honestly, our bosses were for it. They're like, "Hey, like obviously wrench is down, but once you've cracked one, everyone would sit at the middle of the hangar, and we had like a round table, and we would all just sit and talk." And I really, really enjoyed that. And sometimes the pilots would stop by if they were getting off a hitch. Our CEO, our DOM, it just depended on who was available. But we knew every Friday somebody was going to be sitting at that table. So the camaraderie in aviation was one thing that I was really happy to see, especially amongst maintenance folks. But I think you guys hit the nail on the head with, your attitude is everything. From being an apprentice, when I first started working, I told them I wanted to learn what my areas of deficiency were, and that's what I wanted to hit hard. And so they were like, "Sure, we're going to have you, shadow this guy on the back shop and overhauling stuff. And, this guy does avionics work. That is not my cup of tea." So I definitely tried to hang out with him and learn some stuff. And then same thing even now, being an EMS, you a lot of times are the buffer between the pilot and the med crew. because med crew, they have not been around helicopters or aviation at all. And so sometimes the jargon or the acronyms or the things that we're saying, it may not be clicking, but they don't necessarily want to ask. But the pilot, he's been subjected to this for a really long time. So I found that just kind of being a team player and just communicating as best as you can, or kind of bringing stuff down to their level without also making them feel, that they're this big, because that matters, how they feel. And so having those types of conversations and just being willing to moderate and mediate sometimes when it's needed says a lot about a person. And you're exactly right. It only takes one person on the shop floor to not want to come into work. So don't be that guy, and I feel like that's a lot of times what people are screening anymore, and I tell young people that all the time. I'm like, listen, I know your resume is not going to have a lot on it, but I need you to really push to try to get an in-person interview because you have the right attitude and that's what they're honestly looking for. So
Yeah.
just be upfront and honest of you don't know what you don't know, and just tell them that, and they're going to be willing to work
Yep.
with you, especially when they see that you're excited to learn.
Yeah, love that. I think the mentorship side of that is really important. It's easy for us to forget what it was like to be the new person. At the hangar, wherever the job is, you get immersed in where you are, and your confidence level skyrockets, and all of a sudden you forget what it's like to be new. So I think it's important to remember that and to really take the time to educate these folks and to just share that tribal knowledge that we talked about. I'll just touch on the soft skills one more time. Outside of the beer test, whether you want to have a beer with somebody, I think generationally things are changing a little bit. Whereas in my generation, and maybe every generation says this, right? Back in my day, but but generationally, it seems like the work ethic has changed a bit. A lot of young folks don't find the importance or value in showing up early, volunteering, and doing the things that kind of put you in a place of discomfort for the benefit of your own self and your career. We had a conversation with the Thrust Institute out of Texas, and part of their educational program is teaching those soft skills. Encouraging their students, hey, when you get to your job, your first job, make sure you show up 10 minutes early. Show up prepared, fully dressed, ready to work. Don't show up, right when the door cracks open. Get there early. Be prepared. Little things like that, I think, go a long ways. And again, I don't know if I'm looking at things through the lens of an old guy now and be like, these kids don't know what they're doing. But you hear a lot of people talk about the importance of that, and it suggests that the focus has kind of gone away from that. Any insight from you guys is to that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that sort of thing. Once again, it sort of it starts from. I mean, not from the top, or it starts in the environment that they're coming into. If they see that their supervisor on the shop floor, or that their workmate in their team is doing all those things you're mentioning, showing up when he needs to be there, staying the extra hour at the end of the day, giving up his weekend for an air show, then it motivates you to do it as well. And we've been lucky enough with our young guys that have come through. Some of them now, they came to us when they were 16 years old, and they're now 23, possibly even 24, and they're upstanding young guys. They're good young guys, and they're good to have around at the safety review beer on a Thursday as well. Yeah, I guess we come back to culture there, and you motivating each other reciprocally, I guess.
I agree that you can teach the soft skills, but I think the older the people get, it's harder to catch up on missing soft skills. But what you said, Faith, is I think you can easier teach somebody with good soft skills the task on working on a specific helicopter than having an expert on a helicopter, which just doesn't bother, right?
I always tell people in the shop, you're either good with aircraft, you're good with paperwork, or you're good with people. And if you have two of those three, you're looking pretty damn good. Because
Doing all right.
it's really hard to find someone that's got all three.
Yeah.
It's
I
true.
love that.
That's true.
Yeah, very cool. Well, time's coming to an end here, so I just want to finish by thanking you guys for joining us. As we talked about this conversation and kind of envisioned what it'd be, this is far exceeds any expectations I had. Your guys' passion for the industry is outstanding. The mission of Red Bull, the excellence that you guys exude, the peak of performance that is seen throughout your fleet is outstanding. This is one of those conversations I think that will inspire younger folks, as they start their career, or maybe they're in the middle of their career, stepping into a place of discomfort to get you in a position where you want to be in a couple of years, I think is really important. So it's cool to hear your guys' stories and again see where you guys have wound up. So on that note, what closing advice would you have for either someone who's coming in the front door or in the early phases of their career, as far as career development goes?
Yeah. Should I go first, Werner?
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Listen. Firstly, John and Faith, thank you for having us. It's an honor for us to spend a bit of time with you. I think we should do this again sometime.
Yeah.
I didn't have to be as nervous as I was before this. No, it's been really nice to chat with you. But yeah, I mean, I suppose we've touched on this a few times throughout the discussion now, about sort of the next generation and looking to the future and so on. I suppose one thing I put a lot of emphasis on in professional life as well as in personal life is just to keep on learning. Funnily enough, it's actually written into European regulations several times. I wrote down the references once. They talk about continuous improvement and how all these things, like we mentioned earlier about a safety management system and so on, the goal of all these things should be continuous improvement. Of course, they're talking about on an organizational level, but putting a focus on learning, continual training, not resting on your heels and thinking I know it all now, I've done it all. Continuing to learn, continuing to train, getting out of your comfort zone, keeping things interesting for yourself is, I think, the way to achieve that continuous improvement moving forward.
I love that continuous improvement. That 1% improvement's huge. If you can get
Yeah,
1% improvement, I wouldn't even say each day, but incrementally grow in small
yeah,
ways, that's huge. And I just reiterate what you said. That growth, I don't think happens in a place of comfort. I think you have to step out in a place that you're not comfortable getting into and volunteering to do that thing that nobody wants to do, right? But you're willing to raise your hand and say, I'll give it a shot, even though I'm probably not qualified. So love that point. Werner, for you, what comes to mind?
Yeah. So also from my side, thank you for having us. I really enjoyed talking to you and how you led us through that. So I really liked it. Thank you. So what I think is very important. Whatever you do in life, I think it's important that you love what you do and that you're really interested in that and that you look for something that you really love from the bottom of your heart. And when it comes to our specific operation, I think it's important to tell to people that it must not always be the most modern aircraft or the next drone project that can spike an interest in aviation to people, but also something like this, right? So there is the field of aviation is so huge, and we really hope that we can continue to motivate young people to not only get in the modern big companies, but also into to keep the vintage stuff flying, because we think it's worth keeping those aircraft flying for the next generations, so they can see how aviation was 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, right?
100%. I would love to hear that radial engine fly. That kind of stuff is really inspiring. So the next podcast that we record, well, I think will be on the floor instead of remote, right? With in the middle of all those helicopters in Hangar 7. That would be really cool.
you're welcome. You're welcome
Yeah.
anytime.
Faith, for you, closing thoughts and advice for folks as they navigate their careers.
So closing advice, I would say, just to echo what you guys have been talking about, never turn down a learning opportunity. If you're kind of a sponge, people will see that and they will throw more at you, and it'll give you way more opportunity to do new things and expose yourself to everything that you can. As many airframes as you guys have, and likewise the shop that I first started in, we had back shops we could overhaul, we could shadow paint, avionics, interior. It was just amazing to have all of that, at my fingertips. So no matter what it is, give it a go. You may end up liking it, or it may lead you to a totally different path. So yeah, so never turn down an opportunity. But closing thoughts, I selfishly have to ask, as a mechanic. Werner, I can see behind you there's a Red Bull cooler. Do you guys have an endless supply of Red Bull?
Yes, we do. So here it is. Just treated myself.
Sold.
So,
Done. Cut the camera.
You're right. I mean, I tried, didn't to shift it, but I can do it now a little bit. So there is a cooler at the shop. Yes, you're right. We have all the different
and there's
tastes.
And there's one hidden behind our ground power unit over there as well. Let's see.
See, mechanics always have a caffeine addiction. So I'm like, I saw I was thinking about bringing one and cracking it and being like, this ad is sponsored by, and like opening the Red Bull. But I was like, I saw you sipping on it. I was like, I gotta ask him.
Yes, so that comes with the contract.
Yep, you got to put that in the job description.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys so much. Again, it's been an honor to sit here and learn from you guys. This again will be a conversation that inspires folks. It was fun. Got some laughs in. Look forward to meeting you guys in person. Hopefully at European Rotors or even better at your hangar one of these days. But again, thank you for what you guys do. And we'll catch you next time on the Vertical MRO podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
If you're passionate about rotorcraft maintenance, then be sure to check out Vertical's new Instagram channel, @vertical.mro, sharing all things related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. From the latest podcast episodes to conference updates, and even epic photography, Vertical MRO is dedicated to supporting and advancing rotorcraft maintenance, the backbone of our industry. Hey, thanks again for joining us for episode 100 and 101 of the Vertical MRO podcast. Love this conversation. Faith, thanks for joining us. The suggestion to have the Flying Bulls in the podcast, Anthony and Werner, was outstanding. So thank you for that suggestion. There is one piece of news that I feel like we should probably talk about. So Werner, I'm going to hand it over to you and let us know what's up and coming for the U.S.
Yeah, so we would use this platform here to also let you people know that we know that a lot of your audience is listeners from the United States. So this year we will have the rare opportunity to see two of our aircraft, especially the DC-6 and our P-38 Lightning, at the Air Venture at Oshkosh in July. So we'll fly those over the Atlantic for the first time since we got them, so we are happy to see everybody there. There will also be a BO-105 from Red Bull Air Force or from Flying with Aaron Fitzgerald. So yes, take the opportunity, and we'll love to see you there.
Awesome. Well, thanks you guys again. This was an outstanding recording. Thanks for jumping on for our closing segment of the podcast, and thanks for listening to the Vertical MRO podcast. Cheers.
Thanks again.